Now, Sakai is a force of nature. She calls, you don't ask where, when, how, you just turn up. And we have had a few discussions on the nature of the conversation, but I hope what we've settled in is useful to you. And if it's not, blame it, Sakai. If it is, congratulate me. Now, my name is Mungai Lenneiye. I was born in Kenya, but I spent most of my time out of the country, working most places. Zimbabwe has been my base for 40 years, on and off. I turn up and disappear for years and come back. And for remove all doubt, I am neither a businessman nor an entrepreneur. I'm just a bureaucrat. That's me. But in the years I've been bureaucrating, I have learned that it's impossible to ignore the people who change the world. The politicians think they do. Unfortunately, they actually don't. The people who change the world are the people who innovate, the people who change the way we live. And we all forced to, at one time or another, to aspire, to hope that one day we'll be business people or we'll be entrepreneurs or we'll do something that changes the way people live. So my talk today, sir, I'll try and stay to the 20 minutes, 15 you said. It's really, this is an option I've taken, and well, I'll get feedback from Sakai and Kevin whether this is what they were hoping for. I'm hoping that really to discuss the bridging today's innovation challenges with tomorrow's futures. And this, I took it because I think what Sakai and her team are trying to do is game-changing, and there are not enough places in Africa doing it. So well done, Sakai and your team, for trying to shift in a very small way where Africa is stuck to where we think we should be going. So I like the idea of this futures discussion. And what I'm going to try and do is reflect for you from our experience in 15, 16 years on supporting what we call innopreneurs. These are young people I started meeting in 2012 when they were going off to the US as under the YALI, the Young African Leaders Initiative by Obama, to today. And this is a journey of 15 years, and we have a deal with the young people. And I tell them, your job is to teach me innovation, and mine is to teach you bureaucracy. And that's the deal we have. And that deal has held for 15 years, and I hope it will hold for a little longer. Quickly, I will do what I call framing the context. We have a paradox on the continent. We have many ideas, but we have poor linkages, and I think somebody spoke about it. Two, the future is being designed somewhere else. I listened to the lady from HIT. The Chinese are making the solar panels. They are making the batteries. They are making, but we are fighting urgent domestic battles. Necessary, but that's the reality we have. Our challenge, how is to innovate for the current relevance without losing strategic foresight. And that's why I think what Sizadai is trying to say to the business Zimbabwean industry is that there are many difficulties. And tell me one country you can go where there are no difficulties. So yours are not in a particular, they are not peculiar, they might have a few local contexts, but the challenges you face are faced everywhere in the world. The key is how do we innovate our current relevance. We have to live, the citizens have to live, children have to grow without losing that strategic foresight. And therefore, I like the African proverbs. Undugu means networks, familyhood, whatever you want to call it in Swahili. A traveler who only looks back will stumble. Our lens, we have tried to think through issues of connection, collective growth, and African reality. And I think I am a bureaucrat, and I used to consider myself a political economy student, although I didn't do political economy. And a man called Amilcar Cabral, for those of you who are old enough, remember the liberation days. He came from Guinea-Bissau. He used to tell his followers, never confuse the ideas in your head with the reality in which you live, or vice versa. Never confuse the reality in which you live with the ideas in your head. And that, to me, is what we are trying to battle with, struggle with. And the young people I've talked to over the last 15 years, will tell you that's a constant battle we have, is how do you say, this is my reality, and this is my idea? How do you bend the arc to make sure that the reality and your ideas somehow propel you forward? So policy engagement is critical. It's what drives systemic change. And I think my brother here from VCCZ definitely has, and his team have reminded you how important systemic change is and the importance of policy. It is for development. It's not just imitation. So we need to develop. We can imitate, but the main thing is we need to develop, and that's innovation. Finally, education and knowledge is for transformation. That if you cannot use the knowledge you have, and that doesn't mean going to university, if you cannot use that knowledge to transform, then I think I'm afraid you very quickly die. And I like this saying, our ancestors were systems thinkers long before we use the words. There's nothing new when we say about systems, futures, that our ancestors have done. And let me give you an example why I think they have. People who grew up as nomads, nomadic from Fulani to the Maasais to the Borans to the people of Southern Africa, will tell you the following. Nomadic people do not camp forever where they first find pasture. They find pasture, but they keep on moving. That is curiosity. And innovators, entrepreneurs, business people are curious people by their very nature. That is, progress begins with being restless. And I think the lady from the one, I'm trying to remember her name, you made a very good presentation. You suddenly talked about restlessness, from being C-suite to deciding, okay, I'm gonna take a jump and take a risk. That's restlessness. Secondly, it's about collaboration, and our people did recognize this. And there's an African proverb that if we do not move, we will never know where the others are heading. The Africans have, this is, you find societies have been saying this for several hundred years. That is, movement creates learning. Only by moving will you learn. And finally, it's about renewal. A river that stops flowing soon dries up. It's about renewal sustains growth. I did not invent this. I did not tell you which groups they come from. You find the Yorubas, from the Hausas, from the Ethiopians, from the East Africans, from the Southern Africans. It's an African wisdom philosophical view that it is a continuum of innovation from curiosity to collaboration to renewal. But let me come to the subject that Kevin tried to take me to talk about, and I resisted and resisted. Finally, Kevin, you know, I yielded. Finance. So this is about how do we finance ideas to impact. And I think today we listened to some very interesting presentations on what this looks like. And I give you some examples from my ecosystem. Ideation, grants, bootstrapping. They range between 500 and 5,000. 2 weeks ago, we were giving some awards at some organization I work with, we support, and they went from $5,000 to $15,000 for competitions. Hackathons, university challenges. These are going on all the time. Validation, and this is about angel investors and accelerators. And we heard about from HIT, and these ideally should go from about 10,000 to about 100,000. Unfortunately, when you say 100,000 in this country, all the business people and all the rich people run away. And yet, and this is not a criticism, I will walk into many corporations and find a $200,000 top-of-the-range SUV with the labor from Japan to everywhere else. it is enough to fund at least maybe 20 of them, and at the very least 2 of them, to actually become people who have validated the ideas and start going to the market. We tried something called Ciba Savannah. There are a couple of others tried, and I will say something about our journey. Seed, this is where most people think they are at. Venture funds, corporate innovation. And this is anything over 100,000 to 1 million. We've been trying to get somebody to put $2 million to a fund for these young innovators for 10 years. We still haven't succeeded. On this, Udugu Institute supports the 8 to 5, Old Mutual, managing 8 to 5 hub. And clearly, we do require, and I see a few more coming up, blended capital equity investments. And finally, growth. This is where trade finance is becoming important, over 1 million, and Afrexim Bank is definitely doing a bit of this. And certainly, I see now the African Development Bank is doing some research. They're looking to how they can fund it. So there are signs, compared to 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, there's been a lot of progress in this area of going from how do we fund from ideas to impact. But there's a funding gap. This is the missing middle between donor grants and commercial finance. Until COVID came, and until one Donald Trump came, there was a lot of donor money for startups up. It dried up. Some think it's a bad thing. Some say maybe it's a good thing that we should force our private sector to step forward. But this is the missing middle. We don't have, from the big commercial finance, the banks, and quite a lot of them are not funding startups, and the donors who used to give small amounts of money for startups. 2, we lack patient capital, and that I can't say more. It has been said several times. And we don't have the capital willing to learn. The one that says we are leaning towards learning. We are risking a bit of money so we can learn what the ecosystem looks like. There are very few early-stage investors in Zimbabwe. I haven't found any. The one I've found, they tend to tell me they are financing existing companies, the ones that are growing. So you said you bootstrapped. In most societies, you should have found kind of people, early-stage investors, who said, given your background, I mean, you had risen to the top. If you can do it for other people, if you did it for other people, you can do it for yourself too. Sadly, we don't have that. Then we also have regulatory uncertainty for new instruments. We do not have the kind of simple agreements for equity financing. I have not heard of anyone doing it. I've been trying to get some of the people who I know who have some money in this town to do it. I haven't succeeded. And of course, the capital equity investments and crowdfunding, these are tools that at the moment, they are not prevalent in Africa, and certainly in Zimbabwe, we don't have any of them. At least I haven't come across any I can suddenly say they fit. So, I like the African saying, the young tree grows best with both sun and shade. That a young tree will grow whether you put it in the shade or you put it in the sun. So whether you fund them or don't fund them, whether you support them or don't support them, these young people are going to disrupt. Fund them or don't fund them, support them or don't, they will disrupt. Therefore, they will grow because they are young. They are restless. The key challenge in Zimbabwe's startup ecosystem, there are many, but let me look at systemic and institutional barriers. Fragmentation in the innovation support. We don't have a unified pipeline. We have risk-averse financial sector demanding collateral. Every time I hear somebody asking for a collateral, I say, the young man, we put him to university, paid a lot of money to take him there. He has a great brain. That's capital working. So why is he not considered a collateral? How do you collateralize a young person who you have put so much energy, a society has educated them, parents have put efforts, and yet they have no collateral? There are very few limited corporate partnerships beyond CSR. And CSR, unfortunately, and I'm afraid to say to some of my friends who have had to interact with in the corporate world, luckily most of them are not here, they are older than you are, they are my age mates. I've told them, corporate social responsibility, you're asking people to do what you want. When do you ever ask people to use your corporate social responsibility to do what they want? You might be surprised. We have weak university-industry linkages. The universities are trying to become manufacturing outfits. The industry, they have outdated equipment. There's a gap. We seriously have serious linkages in the weak university industry linkages, economic and structural constraints. Those ones, I never say anything when I'm in front of business people because we will never stop talking about economic and structural constraints. And that's my area of work, and that's what I spend many years working on. Currency instability and inflation. Yes, you just talk about it. Instability for business people is bad because it makes it difficult to predict. But it sharpens them too. They become better at reading the environment. And suddenly, if no one was to ask you, between 2007 and I spent 1980 to about 96 and left on and off, came back in 2006 and found some seriously different people as a result of the hyperinflation that was going on. People were starting to change and ask questions. So it is bad for the economy, but it is one of the realities you have to live with. How do you make it work for you, and how do you factor it? And Zimbabwean business people, like many places in Africa, are extremely resilient in figuring out how to make sure that we'll make a plan. Brain drain of skilled graduates. This is serious. I have, in the last 1 year, I've had to engage with companies, organizations, trying to get some young people. Because my job is a young person comes and says, I have this idea, I don't know who to talk to. I say, I've been around long enough. Let me find a phone I can call and connect you up. And all of a sudden, I'm finding some of the people I'm connecting them to, they really are very short of skilled personnel. You can now feel it, especially in the tech area. It's actually, I'm shocked, I'm surprised by sometimes what I was able to do 5, 7 years ago and what I see the young generation in the companies doing now. We have lost the people who would have mentored them to grow. They come out of HIT, they come out of MSU, they are very well trained, but there are not enough mentors where they are going to work. So although they are formatted, the hard disk is formatted, there's no one to help it kind of learn the reality. And of course, low consumer purchasing power, if you're in the formal sector, but out in the informal sector, as they told, the SME told me, we have the money, tell the government to come and see us. Competitions, the double-edged sword. These competitions are good, but they give young people visibility, they give them confidence, they give them exposure, they give them small grants. They also allow some networking and mentorship. She talked about mentorship and from the banks, opportunities. But there are also the cons. There is pitch fatigue has set in this country. Every time I hear some corporate CEO tell me, can you get some young people to come and pitch? I ask them, they say, where are we going to pitch? They're also tired of chasing prices, not markets. The young people of today are not the young people of 15 years ago. They were happy to get $5,000, $10,000. Now they're saying, a price is nice, but I want the market. They are one-off events with no follow-up capital. And I suddenly, back in 2005, when we were sending young Zimbabwean innovators to Nairobi for Obama Summit, YALI, the Entrepreneur Summit, we discovered that lots of good ideas, really earth-shaking ideas, but follow-up capital was very limited. And then, of course, something we have noticed. I've got some people I've been talking to since 2012, and I still see them in the same startup space, pitching and asking for more money, presenting the same idea. So this startup circulate endlessly. We need to break it. We need to find a way of breaking out of it. So, and therefore I like the African saying, a drum sounds loudest before it bursts. Lessons, competition must feed into a national innovation pipeline. It's not enough to have a competition. Feed it in the national pipeline. Then the competition makes sense. The future of startup financing is in blended finance for us in Africa. We need to combine grants and concessional loans and equity. We cannot go to Silicon Valley. That's a $20 trillion economy called the US. We are barely $50 billion. Africa is $3 trillion. So if you want to finance African investors and African entrepreneurs, we have to combine all of them. Grants, concessional loans, equity. We need to use more these credit equity instruments. This idea that you give a young man a loan or woman a loan, you're sinking them into debt. The young person starts thinking, how will I pay this back? He forgets about looking after the idea that in the first place brought. Partners, that is these development finance institutions, corporates and universities need to start de-risking innovation. We need to find a strategy for de-risking in this innovation because they are just what they are. They are very risky, but the payoff is sometimes incredible. And I can give you stories in the last 15 years where I've seen projects. One young man went from one person to 40, 50 people, was doing $10 million a month transactions, but he didn't have the support, not money, but systems and mentorship, and he closed down. So we need to explore regional blended finance. Zimbabwe will not do it alone. South Africa is not going to do it alone. The Kenyans are not going to do it alone. You go to Kenya, you find that most of the investors in that country are donors. There are very few Africans, there are very few Kenyans in the ecosystem who are actually funding it. So we do require to find the Africans to start coming together to start saying, how do you do financing? Now, I come to what Madam Sakai asked me, told me she's thinking about working with my brother over here, venture fund, to start this Zimbabwe Innovation Entrepreneurship Forum. That's my coining of it, whatever she calls it, I don't know. As a national, I think all of us should congratulate you, Sakai, and my brother over here, for this idea, because it is a permanent national platform, and permanence is important, that will help us align financiers, hubs, universities, and government. We need to align those three. You might not like governments. I have worked for governments all my life. Without governments, you're in trouble. They are the biggest buyers of goods and services. They are the people who regulate the economy. They are the people who regulate the market. Well, Donald Trump has reminded us. So you do require governments. You do require the universities, because that's where the knowledge is coming for transformation. You need hubs. That's why young people are meeting to figure out their future. And we require the aligned financiers because they are there to make money, and these young people have ideas that can make you a lot of money if you know how to link with them. We need to test blended financing models. There is no one, I cannot tell you what's going to look like, but I know we do require it because we can't afford either silicon or the Israeli model of telling a young person, here is $100,000, go and do what you can. If you lose it, it doesn't matter. Well, Africa can't afford it. Map innovation pipelines and financing gaps. We need to have a better understanding of it. And my friend Gondo, where is he? Francis, I saw him around from SME. We tried it 2019 with a couple of development partners to map this with HIT and the vice chancellor there, and we really didn't get very far, and the COVID came and stopped us. We also need to find a way how to report to NDS2 and NDS3 when it finally comes through the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, because that is where CZI reports through. And two, they are talking about raw industrialization and innovation, so let's challenge them. Quick one, I'll reflect on our experience, our journey through the ecosystem. We have experimented. We tried Innovation Baraza for ideation creation in 2015. We tried Simba Savannah to try and get young people to tell their stories. We tried a Simba Angel Fund to blended finance prototype. We tried B2C co-working spaces down the road. Those of you at Bantanai Mall started off with 3 young people. Before COVID, they had 120 young people coming there every day. COVID killed it. They're now back to 80. We tried 85 with Old Mutual, trying to create a hub. It remains a glorified co-working space. I'm not sure they like me to say it, but that me as a person who leads a team that manages it, I think we could do a lot more with these hubs in terms of helping the acceleration process. And this is about become corporate innovation and partnership like the bank there is doing. So, and with the Comrade Gondwe and the Minister of SMEs, we tried a youth and women enterprise program. We called it YAWEP, to try and find a way of a private sector initiative for inclusivity. It aborted, we still have to pick it up after COVID came and left. So we have been talking to some people about Black Stars Africa Fund to look at blended finance. And if you see me in the next 3-4 years, that's going to be what I've been talking about, because I think we do require to find blended finance for these young people. Lesson from Simbas: bright, good people, businessmen, business people, but they offered advice, not capital. Advice is good, but if you give me advice and I have no pot to cook I have no pot, I have no food to cook, you can teach me how to cook, but I don't require to be able to cook. True angel investing combines wisdom and wealth. So it's not enough to come and tell me your wisdom, but you need to put a bit of resource on the table to help me transform my reality, something else. You cannot milk a cow you did not feed. That's what we need to teach that is, you cannot come and give me ideas and tell me I'm going to give you mentorship, I'll take 10% of your equity. You are caught milking a cow you did not feed. Mentorship must empower. It must not extract. Do not ask a young person to give you equity, be good in mentorship. Put some money, capital, then mentorship, you deserve equity. From co-working to hub, this is a transition challenge of balancing inclusivity and structure. 8 to 5, open, affordable, youth-friendly, but that's all it is. They drive themselves, they run it themselves. I hardly ever go there, maybe once every 3 months, and they are doing a great job running it themselves. But they are doing it themselves. If you go there and ask them to tell you, why should I tell you what you are doing? What have you given us for you to tell us what you're doing? And I told them, you're right to do that. 8 to 5, corporate structured, scalable. Challenge is moving from creative freedom to disciplined innovation. These young people are seriously, they tell me co-creation, collaboration, and they are very good at it. But how did they go from that creative freedom, that they are free to imagine, to actually have the discipline to actually innovate? And what do we need to do? And therefore, I like the African proverb, a tree cannot grow without both roots and branches. They need the wisdom and they need the capital. The lesson is that co-working builds trust, hubs build traction, and both are essential. Universities and industry renewal, there's a gap, bridging academia and enterprise. This is a serious problem across Africa, and you are no different. Universities are producers of patents, not products. The idea that a university is going to manufacture is nice, but I'm afraid their job is to produce patents, make money to finance the next researchers, and let industry get on with the job of producing products. Industries are shrinking without renewing production processes. This is the problem we have on the continent. We inherit the colonial infrastructure all over the continent. Industry, that equipment is outdated. We are not renewing the processes. And even if you did, you're not asking yourself, was making cotton for Manchester and Liverpool back in 1950s what we should be doing today? Should the equipment be changing? Should we be thinking of new processes? There's a missing link of translational innovation into production, and this is a big challenge. So our proposal is joint industry, hub residencies, and sector innovation labs. We need the agri people to say, National Foods, and I've challenged a few of them, say, create an innovation lab for the sector, for the mining industry, for the tobacco industry, for the whatever industry you're in, create a sector innovation lab. Produce hub residencies. We congratulate. Yes, sir. I'm going to do the political thing and say I'm getting there. I'll quick speed up. We do require to make sure that we get the residencies. We need companies that create residences. We congratulate the banks. More people need to do that. And of course, sector innovation, that's for the industrialists. Knowledge without use is like a well without water. I can learn all I have. If I do not use of it, I'm not just going to be having no water. Innovating today and preparing for tomorrow. The tension between survival and strategy. I will just leave it for you to read it because I've been told I better shut up. While the wise build granaries, the short-sighted build fences. Future thinking is itself an innovation discipline. So when you are called here by Cesar Dai and said, we are talking about futures, you are being asked to innovate. The futures itself is an integral part of innovation. And she is asking us with the venture capital, innovate in this space. We believe that you need to innovate systems, institutions, and technology. Technology without institutions and systems is dangerous. An axe is just an axe. I can choose it to kill my neighbor. I can choose to cut a tree and build a house. What choice I make depends on the institutions and the frameworks and the systems in place. There's one minister said to young people when the Zimbabwe Youth Council, when we were trying to talk to them, he said, look out through the window, what do you see? They said cars. What side are they driving on? Minister, on the left, of course. He said, imagine there was no government and systems to decide which way you drive. They said, we see. So these are important. Innovation in Africa means solving everyday problems for its citizens. And that starts with systems, not just startups. Blended capital finance, we need to increase philanthropy. We need to do CIs. We need to kind of do regional integration. Because if you want to go far, go together. Nostalgia versus foresight. Many leaders remain nostalgic for past economic comfort zones. I say no more. Tomorrow's innovators are building new markets entirely. And this, I've always, when they get invited by business people to talk to them, CEOs, I will tell them, we cannot drive forward staring at the rear view mirror saying what the old economy, how nice it was, because we'll miss the future and crash our vehicles. Paths are made by walking, so we require steady forward movement. Looking back, rooted in the future, and this is my final slides. Looking back, rooted in today, into the future. That is, we have no choice. Our history matters. You stand firmly on it. But you also stand firmly on it today in order to look at the future. So my two final slides is about a reflection. Policy, innovation, knowledge for development. Our ancestors were innovators and future thinkers long before we use the words. So somewhere along the line, we have to fight the pride in our inheritance. And I think some of the people who spoke this morning spoke very proudly about Zimbabweans. We need to remember justice. Do not try and shortchange the young innovator just because he is poor, he can't afford $200. Justice demands that you give them due what is due to them. And we also need to learn to do two things. We need to learn to lead, like you used to lead. You used to learn, you learned how to follow, you are follower once. And that duality, we need to build on it so that we can build a new reality in Africa and Zimbabwe. And my final slide is this one. African startups in the invention, adoption, innovation continuum. These guys are leaders in innovation through adaptation. They are very good. Show them something, they will tell you how they can do something better with it. They are not new innovations. They are more about transforming existing ideas into inclusive, resilient, and scalable local solutions. After that, they will improve it, and they will innovate, and they will create new products. So our next leap requires investment in invention infrastructure. That is, they have copied. They have given you a service. Give them infrastructure for them to invent the future. We need policy incentives. And sir, thank you very much, Minister of Finance, for thinking about it. We need research in industry, universities, to push the continent from adoption-driven innovation to regional invention-led transformation. You learn to cut down the tree using an old axe. I thank you.
Thank you very much to Sakai for the invitation. And indeed, I think Dr. Mungai did highlight that you're a strong force. When she calls and says, I want you to come speak, you put everything down and you make yourself available. So it is really a pleasure and an honor to talk to you, this afternoon. I've been given 40 minutes. I think I'm the one standing between you and the lunch. And yes. So I am going to just throw out some ideas, and it's really reflecting on the Zimbabwe ecosystem. As I think Sakai introduced me earlier, I was born in Bulawayo, moved to South Africa in 1988. I have lived in that ecosystem. I have spent a lot of my time, probably half of my professional time, contributing to building this African ecosystem. Today, I work right across different ecosystems. So tomorrow, I leave here and I go to Botswana to help Botswana with their national innovation hub for the next few days. So that's the title of my talk, Towards an Enabling Zimbabwe Entrepreneurship and Startup Ecosystem, a practical solution design. And I'll just go through about 5 areas, just looking at some of the background. Some of the background has been covered this morning. And it's good to actually have seen the background by the other speakers, because it tells me that my absence from the country has not made too much of a difference in terms of me being in touch with reality. So I do come back here at least 3 times a year. I teach at Africa University every October, November for a week. And so that keeps me also informed about what's going on. I think the current reality is that Zimbabwe does have a nascent entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem, but it's growing, and we're seeing it in terms of the startups, we're seeing it in terms of the activity, the vibrancy that's coming out. There have been obviously challenging macroeconomic conditions in the country, but despite that, remarkable resilience, adaptability. The system does remain very much fragmented, undercapitalized. I think the conversations around the funding are quite clear that there's not enough capital. But I think perhaps the biggest challenge is that there's no unified vision. And if you look at the big economies, the big ecosystems that have grown, whether it's Singapore, or whether it's China, or whether it's Korea, or whether it's Kigali, Rwanda, there's been a unified vision in terms of this is where we're going to go, and this is how we're going to coordinate what we need to do. And so what I'm, in essence, proposing, and this is some thoughts, is to look at how do we then build something that can be a powerful engine for innovation, for growth, for job creation, for economic development. If we quickly look at the SWOT analysis of the ecosystem, and I think the strengths are quite clear to all of us. Highly adaptive, resilient entrepreneurial talent. I think some of the talks that we've heard, whether it's Nancy this morning, and some of the other entrepreneurs are testimony to that. The talent is here, incredible, resilient, and very much capable. There are active innovation hubs, much of them at the universities. We're seeing obviously Standard Bank and the other people coming through in terms of the hubs. It's a strength because it means that there are cogs on the ground. Clear policy direction, I believe there is. From an education 5.0, Lodrina gave an incredible presentation around what the universities are doing. It's a strength. Large diaspora. Earlier, a gentleman sitting in the middle there spoke about the diaspora outside. Many of us are sitting outside. How do we capitalize on that particular strength? She came back from South Africa. There's many Zimbabweans that are sitting outside. How do we capitalize on that for them to come back? That provides some opportunities. I think the opportunities are quite many. The diaspora, the AfCFTA, once we sort out some of the politics, the digital infrastructure provides an opportunity for us to leapfrog and not do things the way that things used to be done. But there are some weaknesses, and I think much of the talk is going to be really structured around how do we then address some of these weaknesses. The weak university industry collaboration is going to form a key part of what I'm going to talk about. There's some cumbersome regulatory environment, so at times, government fixes one thing, but then something else becomes, a challenge. And we can talk around some of the things that we've seen, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector. Policy inconsistency is a challenge, and I think it's been quite clear, this morning that industry is not really much, involved. I think the biggest threats are geopolitical. If I'd asked any of you, probably about 2 years ago, what would happen in America and what the impact of a change of presidents in America would be on Zimbabwe and the rest of the continent, I don't think you'd give me the answer that you give to me today. So much of the funding, whether it's USAID or any of the American institutions, has been impacted. And I think there's a lot that we're going to see, the trade wars that are going on. And if we don't fix the ecosystem, the biggest threat is that we're going to lose the talent. We are already losing the talent. I think it's going to continue, to take place. So the landscape, there are leading institutions. I've just selected a few. The challenges, we have, highlighted that. The value of death is quite significant. I mean, many of the ideas that come out of universities never make it to the market, for various reasons. At times, first of all, some of the ideas are very academic. They're not applied. They're not relevant to industry. But at times, those ideas are not. Industry doesn't see those ideas, and therefore, never get anywhere. If we look at the hubs, and my focus is really on the innovation hubs at universities, the ones that have been born out of 5.0. There are strengths. I think we've seen some prototypes that have been developed. The student entrepreneurship, training that they're providing, it's great because it provides a change in culture as to how things should be done. There are some occasional startups. There is, good research capabilities, but there are some weaknesses. And so last year, was it last year or the year before, we went through the trade fair and looked at all the different hubs. The first thing that struck me was that there was not differentiation. All of them seem to be doing the same thing, and all of them seem to be competing for the same partners. So there was competition rather than collaboration. Weak commercialization pathways. All of them wanted to actually spin out, startups, and to get a startup out, it means that there's huge investment that is going to be, made, and there's inconsistency, mentorship, quality. So I think one of the challenges that I've faced in working in different ecosystems is that the people that are meant to provide incubation, they themselves need to be incubated. Right? So if you're going to incubate startups, the bigger question for me is, have you sold anything? Ever. Right? Because if you've never sold anything, you do not know what it's like to incubate. And that's the biggest challenge that we see. And that's, Dr. Mungai refers to, these competition entrepreneurs. Much of it is, the people that are running these spaces, all they know is like pitching. But the entrepreneurs need more than pitching. They need market access. And so we need to be able to start to address, some of these, and much of it, when I come to, some of the proposals around the hubs, is how do we position the hubs in such a way that they actually do what they need to do. The people that are running the incubators, they must have gone out, sold something, even if it's golden products, or sold tomatoes in the street or something. But there has to be that practical experience of rejection, a practical experience of engaging directly with the market. If we look at industry here in Zimbabwe, I think we heard from the presentation this morning from the from Mutapa. Is it Mutapa, right? Yeah. Large established corporations in mining, agriculture, some in retail, and some, obviously, they've gone, disappeared. Others have been in distress. They're coming up. Many of them are risk averse because the focus has been on survival, given the difficult, challenging times that this country has gone through in recent years. So the level of corporate venture capital doesn't, exist. There's very few companies that will say we are going to, support, startups, and so there's a few that actually would say, well, startups would add value to us, and many of those that do that, they've got younger, CEOs or younger executives that are actually forward, looking. But I think the advent of AI, I believe there was a great masterclass yesterday on AI, is actually going to change the way that we do business, and many of the corporates, if they're not getting onto digitization and AI, will be left behind. Obviously, there's a few sector incubators. I just selected a few, and emerging accelerators. And I think when it comes to accelerators, also we've got to appreciate that accelerators and incubators are different. And I'll come back. I've got a couple of slides building up on what Sakai spoke about earlier, early childhood development. Incubators are right at the beginning, pre-revenue. Accelerators often are growth and at revenue stage. Incubators will take you to revenue, and at revenue stage, in essence, you then have to get into an accelerator. Accelerators, the most successful accelerators, are linked to specific industries. They are sector, focused. Government in Zimbabwe is playing a great role, whether it's education, 5.0, or the establishment of the venture fund. It's great, work, that is being, done in that area. But there are some gaps, and we'll come back in terms of perhaps some proposals in terms of how to address that. About 2 weeks ago, the World Intellectual Property Organization released the latest statistics on Global Innovation Index. And this shows how countries fare in respect of innovation. Unfortunately, Zimbabwe has been regressing since 2022. And so this index is made up of two parts. Is what we call innovation inputs and innovation outputs. So on the inputs, it would be things like investment in research and development. It would be the institutions. It would be how much we're putting into supporting entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. On the outputs, it's things like patents and publications and all sorts of things. And so there's certain things that we need to be addressing, significant focus from a corporate point of view in terms of R&D as corporates. That becomes very, very important, because the universities cannot be the only ones that are generating patents. Corporate is quite critical, to that. So we need to be able to address, these and look at skills and look at, how we develop. So the framework that is being proposed is in essence one that then ties in universities, startups. And again, I think startups and SMEs are different. Not every startup, in my view, is an SME, but not every SME is a startup. So the focus should be on how we grow startups, innovative or innovation-led startups, the ones that are going to scale. And so we're looking at companies like Nancy's company that started off, I think your first product was probably the maize. Now it's scaled both in terms of market for the first product, but also there's now new products that are being added. The scaling is going to be beyond just Zimbabwe. We're going to see Nancy's products across the continent as the AfCFTA comes through, and that's really what we're looking at. These companies that are going to provide value. And I think part of making the system work is in some of these proposals is how do we then start to contribute to a startup act. So I think just 3 slides just to unpack the early childhood development as a blueprint. So from pregnancy through to post-birth, there's different actors. Where it's midwives, nutritionists, pediatricians, community health workers, etc. Each one of them has got a distinctive role, but these roles are connected. And they're connected around one goal, which is a healthy mother and child. And so similarly, when it comes to the startup ecosystem here, we need to make sure that we're providing stage-specific support for startups from conception to maturity in a coordinated manner. Each one of the players along that value chain having a clear role, but also focus on shared outcome, which is a thriving, competitive startup ecosystem. So if we are to break it down into 4 stages, the pregnancy stage is the ideation, the problem identification, and this is where the hubs, in essence, scan for ideas. This is where industry provides their pain points to universities, provides their pain points to the hubs, to the startups that are not part of the university ecosystem. This is where mentors guide through the problem solution fit development. It's the hackathons that take place. It's some of the proof of concept work that needs to be done. And then we get to the birth and the post-natal, which is really the validation and early traction. And here it's the incubators. How do we then start to develop viable business models? How do we develop minimum viable products that we can go and test in the market? How does the Zimbabwe Venture Fund offer appropriate funding to these ideas? And how do we also then pilot them? How do we link these startups to customers so that they can come out and say we have sold, not we are going to sell? That for me is quite critical, and it's a pity that he has walked out, because I think from a funding point of view, I don't know how much you're looking, which is why you have to bootstrap, but in essence there's a gap, and the gap in funding, not only in Zimbabwe, by the way, it's right across the continent. The gap in funding is for funding in the range of, I think, $40,000 US, $40,000 US to about $200,000 US. That's the gap. You can't find that money, because if you go to him, he will say that it's too small. Why? Because the transactional costs of processing that with the due diligences that they have to do is too high. So somehow, this is an area where government needs to come in and provide risk capital and address a market failure, provide the 50,000, that, she might need to just prove the idea, demonstrate that there's a customer willing to buy, and therefore, from there, she can go to him and say, I need this big, amount of money. The third part here is at infancy. This is a seed. This is where the private accelerators come in because the idea has been proven. There are industry pilots. This is where we then have some matching funds where government says, we're going to provide 50% of the funding. Industry, come on board, provide the other 50%. And therefore, and the benefit goes to industry, right? So if, Nancy needs, $500,000, dollars, government must come in and say, we're going to put in $250,000 as a grant. You put in the other 250,000, or basically, private sector or whoever puts in the other 250,000 can be, equity on good terms. Because the benefits will come back to the country in any event. Because if she succeeds, there are taxes that government is going to get, whether it's corporate tax or whether it's employee tax or whether it's tax as the goods move out into the market. And then the last part, which is the scaling and growth, is then integrating into the supply chain, value chains, but also government playing its role. And this is, for me, one of the things that I've said that government is a big procurer of goods. How do we make sure that government policy says X percentage of government procurement must go to startups, Zimbabwean startups? And we've seen it in the province of Gauteng, where I've spent a lot of my time. 30% of procurement by government has got to be to SMEs. So that is actually insisted, and every government department has got to report on that, who have they actually worked with. So government has got an enabling role. I think from a policy and regulation point of view, the Startup Act is one form, and I'll come to summarize that. But also there's certain incentives, whether it's incentive for industry to be able to invest in research and development, or incentives for industry to put in money into startups where they can get lower taxes for whatever they've put in, whether it's fast-tracked intellectual property registration processes and even subsidizing intellectual property registration. So in South Africa, for example, the Department of Trade and Industry provides support for international registration of patents, which can be quite costly. And it could also be, fast-tracking just any, permits that need to be done. I think an anchor funding, so government has got a big role around the funding, market creation, dedicating a particular percentage of procurement, and even perhaps going one step further and saying any company that operates in Zimbabwe has to procure goods from small, medium enterprises, from startups, and they have to report once a year as to who do they procure from. I think the infrastructure support, that's a role of government, and coordination of universities and research, that is actually a critical part. I think if I turn my attention now to the innovation hubs, and I'll talk to the innovation hubs perhaps in two ways. One, around talent pipeline, and secondly, the role of the hubs in respect of industry. I think there's a redefined role with startups. I think the hubs can be the catalyst for spinning out the startup. So if you go back to our early childhood development model, the hubs are specialists in pregnancy to birth stages, because they have to do the pre-incubation. But now we need to analyze, and we need to have honest conversations with ourselves and say, who are the people that are managing those hubs? What experience do they have? Do they understand what needs to be done? And perhaps we need to develop standards for incubation at all the innovation hubs, so that it's quite clear that if any person has gone through a hub, what stages have they gone through? So that they're not perpetually going from one incubator, from one hub to the next hub, and to a private hub, outside, and so forth. And I think the second role is really with industry, and this is quite important, and I'll spend, I think, the bulk of the presentation, trying to provide some thoughts on this, is that the hubs need to work with industry in terms of problem identification. I think there's a role in terms of collaborative research, acting as either as technology transfer offices, with the university, with industry, but also shared IP arrangement. So one of the things that I've seen in the work that I do with assisting universities to come up with IP policies is that often universities just want to own all the IP. And then when they negotiate with industry, they're negotiating very tough. And I say, there's no need for you to be tough. Your first goal as a university is to get a deal done with industry. Regardless of how bad it is, just get a deal done. Once you've got the deal done, you've learned something, then you can improve on to the next one, so you build up on credibility. So I think the framework that we need to look at is one that incentivizes collaboration between the hubs themselves, different hubs, rather than competition. So the hub at HIT should be able to collaborate with the hub at NUST, or the hub at Chinhoyi should be able to collaborate with the hub in Mutare, etc. And by so collaborating, we're able to also have shared resources, whether it's expensive equipment, but also joint programs. And so 3 things really around the hubs. One is a network, a unified network model. So where there's a National University Innovation Network with a shared branding, coordinated programs, and even certifying courses for people that are working in the hubs, so that we know that these people know what it means to develop an idea. They know how to build a business model canvas. They know how to put together a business plan. They know what it takes to go out, to market, and they know how to graduate, a startup. But also this particular, network would also have pooled resources, because there will be specialized resources that not each university, hub can afford to have on their own, and therefore this pooled resource can be sitting within the network. And then obviously the incubation model, a standardized incubation model, and then the second part of it is really sectorial specialization. I think all the hubs cannot be doing everything. They have to choose. So maybe Chinhoyi can then focus on livestock, veterinary, and maybe Lupane can just focus on agro-processing. And maybe NUST should be more high-tech with University of Zimbabwe, and so forth. So I think it's quite important to then just, focus, because also for industry, it becomes easy to know where to go because of, the specialization. And I think the second part around the sectoral specialization is an alignment with the regional and industry priorities. So, and I think with CZI, we can map out the industries that are, first of all, starting with the members of CZI, but secondly, looking at the priorities of the country, which industries are going to drive growth into the future, and then look at value chain collaboration. The last part is industry-led advisory boards that work, with the hubs. I think, two specific, practical things. One is corporate innovation partnerships. So this is really structured, matchmaking, where we can be able to systematically match the hubs or the startups based on industry needs and the capabilities of the startups, the capabilities of the hubs. What format could this be? This could be a quarterly matching events. It could be structured pilot programs, and so forth. Another one which I've worked a lot with is Open Innovation Platform. And this can be a mediated platform, whether it's run by CZI, where CZI reaches out to its members on an annual basis and say, tell us what are your most pressing challenges, or what are you working on that you're going to need support in the future. And then there's these industry needs, and then CZI then goes out to all the hubs, all the universities, the startup communities, and say, these are the needs. And then do you have any solutions? And then bring back those solutions and then start to do matching. Some of them will be easy because it will be technology transfer, acquisition. Others will be more medium term and therefore joint collaboration. But both of these programs do require trust to be built. So value chain financing is another one, and I'll give two specific examples. And here, the corporate identifies the operational challenge or innovation opportunity within a particular value chain, and then there is a co-investment that they would make, and then scale. So if you look, for example, one of the ag tech ones, which is in the cotton ginnery. What they were looking for is a traceability in a platform. There's a hub or a startup that has developed a prototype and is in one of the incubators. It could be sitting in a Standard Bank incubator, and then the ginnery then will provide a letter of intent, let's say for 3 provinces to say, or even just for one, to say they want to test it with an intent to scale it. And then sign off, off-take agreements with expansion clauses, and the venture fund then provides, the investment on the back of industry. If you take, another one in the tobacco processing, there might be a need for precision irrigation monitoring to improve leaf quality. And there's an IoT solution that one of the startups, might be having, and they need, some money, and industry could advance, that money, $100,000, and the venture fund could provide, the balance of $300,000, as equity. There's an off-take agreement, which means that there's money that is actually guaranteed. So those are just 2 examples. I think the last part is really looking at the diaspora. I think there's a need to create a diaspora engagement platform, and the value of the diaspora is there's a lot of capacity that is sitting outside of the country. I just look in South Africa. The corporates, corporate leaders, how many Zimbabweans? The CEO, group CEO of MTN is Zimbabwean. And you can count them and you see them, and all of them are contributing to other economies. And many of them, when you talk to them, they are prepared to provide mentorship and industry linkages. And so how do we actually tap into that? Perhaps an angel investment network of Zimbabweans in diaspora is something that could be spun out, and some skills venturing. So I think if we look at the policy levers, the Startup Act is one, and I think that's really something that government should work together with industry on to put a startup. That's just drawn from the template that the African Union has put together, based on some of the practices, whether it's Rwanda or Kenya or Tunisia. And then the catalytic funding that we're speaking about, small amounts of money, but it should be actually quite a big fund, looking at university mandate and the diaspora engagement. So, I mean, from a governance point of view, there's a whole lot of iterations, and what I've provided here is just some thoughts, where you bring on board the industry associations, you bring on board government, the diaspora networks, academic leadership, and chairmanship of this forum, which I believe really what we have here in this collaboration between NCC, FZ, and CZI. I think it's great that you're changing the name. Yeah, NVF. And CZI is actually a great one, because then there is a secretariat that it could easily sit with CZI as industry, because, and I think the comment that I had earlier is that, and it's not only here in Zimbabwe, it's everywhere across the continent, no one trusts government, right? Yet government is critical, but very few people trust government, but people are prepared to trust industry association, and I think CZI and NVF can rotate the chairmanship of the forum, and over a period of time, as the universities mature, and you can actually get them to actually be also part of the leadership. So there are some global successes, and we need to be learning from those global successes. And I'll just flash out a few of them. You will get the slides, so feel free to engage with them. You can also engage with me on LinkedIn or directly. But some of these, so if you look at Israel, for example, that's a government-enabled but private sector-led approach. Singapore is really around structured hubs, and these hubs are accredited. There's an accreditation system. Chile is one country that is also capitalized on its diaspora, most of them based in the US. And if you really, start up Chile, or much of it was driven by the Chile Startup, Foundation to build that up. Kenya is an emerging ecosystem. It's not where it should be. I think, Dr. Mungai would probably know that ecosystem quite well. Kenyans, the one thing that they're good at is they're good at marketing, and they will market and market. But I think what we're seeing in that ecosystem is a lot of the multinationals settling in there. We're seeing a lot of international capital coming in from the US into that particular market. It's quite interesting because we're also seeing Kenyans, startups whose founders are not Kenyans, but the environment is quite conducive. And then Estonia, which gave us great innovations, and Rwanda is one. So, I mean, there's more information on this, and I think if you haven't read the books, The Startup Nation, it's worthwhile to actually read it. But the Israel ecosystem, I don't think it's something that can be reproduced elsewhere. And the main reason is that it's largely driven by the military industry. So, and you've got to then understand also the education system. So context becomes important. So the education system, which then, people then go to military, et cetera. But that book is actually quite a good one. Estonia, great, work that they've been able to do. It's really the home of Skype, although I don't think anybody uses Skype today. But what has happened is that they've also birthed other startups, whether it's Bolt and so forth, and they've provided different things, which is also e-residency. So I think there's a lot that Zimbabwe can be able to do. We don't have to rely only on the talent in Zimbabwe. How do we attract people in diaspora, or even other Africans or Europeans to come and settle here and share part of their capability? And this is where Estonia, with their residency, visas, etc., and the startup visas, and fast-track residency has actually, been able to do it. Rwanda, very much government-led, because government knows where it wants to be. 1994, a country that was in ruins, very sad story, but today Rwanda is different. So I was there last week, working with a couple of the universities, and much of what they're driving right now is also on the healthcare side. And that's a country to watch, because they're very clear, and industry is also, pulling around, and there's a lot of, donor money. So this is just some guidelines. Perhaps, this is the start of what you're doing, now. I think there'll be a need to convene, quite soon, within the next 3 months, and start to, form an alliance, look at a governance, structure, and so that it's not just a once-off event. Look at how you contribute to the text of the Startup Act, so that it's not government drafting the act, but it's industry actually saying, what do we really want in the act? And some of the thoughts in terms of that act, are provided in terms of the definitions, the tax benefits, etc. So there's a lot that actually can be done, and I think the efforts that have started here will succeed. There's no doubt about it. One of the things that I tell people is that when I started working in this African ecosystem in 2004, that's when I started working for government. We had a long-term vision in terms of where we wanted to take South Africa. At the time, the universities were not patenting. At that time, the universities were not even getting any spin-outs out. We worked hard. 2006, we had a policy. In 2008, there's a law that I led the drafting of. And then you fast forward. Today, the universities in South Africa are the biggest contributors to the patenting. They're the biggest contributors to the startups that are coming out. There is a vibrant university ecosystem that is emerged, and they're starting to engage with industry. They're starting to fill in the gap that industry has left, because industries die, unfortunately. So I started off working for De Beers. De Beers does not, that particular division doesn't exist in South Africa today. Sasol, many of you might know of them. They're scaling back. So who replaces them? It's going to be yourselves, the new industries. I think the market driving this is a way that is going to happen. But you have to track what you're doing. So there has to be a dashboard. So when you're driving, you don't just drive blindly. You get in the car, you switch on the ignition, and you look at the dashboard. Are there any lights that are on? If there is a red light or an orange light, you check, is it a petrol light or is it an engine light? And as you drive, you keep on monitoring the dashboard, because you want to figure out whether you're going to get to your destination. And so similarly, these are just some of the matrices that can be built on. Some are qualitative, others are quantitative. This is just an example in terms of what your high-level dashboard could look like on an annual basis, where you're reporting at the end of 12 months and say, we now have an act. We've got so many startups that have been established. There's so many jobs, direct jobs, that we have been able to bring through. The National Venture Fund can be able to say so much capital has been deployed, so much FDI has been, or co-funding has been brought in, so much has been contributed by industry, etc. And so I think for me, being here is really to add my voice to, I think, a decision that has been made by yourselves under the leadership of CZI and the National Venture Fund to put an industry-led ecosystem. And this has got to be, private sector has got to lead by example, and industry has got to, if there's industry partners here, I'll say, put aside a portion of your profits or your budget, towards collaboration in working with universities, working with startups. It doesn't have to be a lot. Start off small, 2%, 5%, but make the effort, make the commitment. And I think government has got to do its part. The universities have got to do their part, because the future of Zimbabwe's economy depends really on our ability to transform the potential that we see into scalable, sustainable ventures that will be able to solve the real problems and create lasting value. Thank you.